Now, from the COVID-19 pandemic to port congestion, from rising energy prices to evolving government regulations and product shortages, there is no end in sight to the challenges businesses are facing. Isn't sustainability then the first casualty when navigating a topsy-turvy world? How do companies find a balance between environmental sustainability and commercial sustainability? Don't businesses have to stay profitable and deliver value to their board, to the shareholders, and to their customers? So, next we have a panel discussion on how sustainable products can be profitable to the industry. Before we start with this panel discussion, I would like to invite Mr. Thomas Burgess. He would like to say a few words. So, please go ahead.
Thank you, Anisha. Just wanted to take this opportunity to thank my colleague, Dr. Ajit Ranade, who was kind enough to agree to my request to moderate this session. I just want to say I can't think of a more, more suitable and eminent person. He's been part and parcel of ABG's initiatives, not just as an economist, but as a person who has contributed in the area of sustainability, has been a champion. And thank you, Ajit, for agreeing to do this session. Also, we'll need to speak to you separately after the session is over. Thank you so much for being here. I think you've got a brilliant panel, and we've had 2 days of very exciting presentations, and yesterday a brilliant panel by Vikram. And I hope you didn't miss the session of Dr. Pradeep last evening. It probably was one of the best addresses I've seen in the last 30, 40 years. So over to you and over to Anisha to introduce the panelists. Thank you, Ajit, again for making it here.
Thanks very much.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varghese. We are now going to move on to our panel discussion on how sustainable products can be profitable to the industry. Please welcome our moderator, Dr. Ajit Ranade, President and Chief Economist of the Aditya Birla Group. Joining him in this discussion are Mr. Jagdish Parikh, Joint President, Business Excellence and Chief Sustainability Officer, Aditya Birla Textiles, Mr. Ashish Malik, Head of Sales, Marketing and Customer Care, Last Mile Mobility Business, Mahindra Group, Ms. Betsy Vincent, Head ESG, Green Cell Mobility, Mr. Anirudh Jalan, Co-founder, Recycle, and Ms. Ulka Kelkar, Director, Climate World Resources Institute, WRI. A warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this virtual summit. I'll hand it over to Dr. Ranade to take this discussion forward.
Thank you, Ms. Anisha. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy and privileged to be here. Special thanks to my friend Thomas. So Thomas and I go back many, many, many years, and he's been very kind to me. He said that I have been a champion or been part of the team which has been advocating what is now broadly known as sustainability for, I don't know, maybe 12, 15, 13, 14 years. But Thomas and his team are the ones who actually make it happen. It's one thing to be an advocate or a champion, but quite another thing to actually make it happen and translate it into real products and services and take it to the consumer and so on. So thank you, Thomas, very much. And I'm delighted to be here. I'll be, of course, more like a traffic conductor. So I'll be happy to participate, but we have an excellent panel. And we had, I think we circulated some pointers. So I will request the panel that will go along those lines. Of course, you're free to add your other comments or deviate from our plan. What I propose is I'll ask each one of you to maybe make a very, very, very brief opening remarks on the topic, starting with the sequence that we said, Mr. Parikh first, Mr. Malik, then Ms. Vincent, I think then Mr. Jalan, and then Ms. Kelkar, and then we'll have another round of discussion. So as you can see, the topic does not use the word pandemic in it. Can sustainable products be profitable? So actually don't be confined to only the pandemic context. It's actually it's a topic which is much more generic and actually is relevant for all times, in the sense that I think we've come a long way. There used to be a time when the word sustainable products or green products used to mean something more expensive, something difficult to sell, something which has to be packaged and created a special kind of brand pull. but that was some time ago. I think we've come some distance from them, from those times. Now, my favorite example is that automatically when a customer goes looking for a fridge, before even you see the price tag, you see its 5-star rating. It has become second nature to us. And what is true for a fridge is going to happen for televisions and for maybe even mobile phones and a variety of consumer products. It's going to happen hopefully for textiles, that people go and look at, is it a natural textile? Is it organic? Is it cotton? Is it viscose? Or is it, how environmentally sound is it? It's becoming second nature to us. In fact, three forces are actually at play. Number one, our customers or consumers themselves whose preference seems to be shifting and becoming more pro sustainability oriented products and services. Number two, our investors. That is, investors are saying we are going to invest in companies which show us stronger what they call ESG credentials, or who have a stronger and well demonstrated sustainability agenda and action. And number three are now also youngsters who are seeking employment, job seekers, who say that we don't want to work for companies who are in quote unquote dirty industries and dirty products. So we want to be associated with companies. So you see there are three different forces: customers, job seekers or young people seeking employment, and investors, shareholders. I'm not even referring to regulators or governments or policymakers who are, of course, constantly tightening the screws on you. So you see, there are so many forces at play here, but we still want to address the basic question: are sustainable products profitable or not? Do they make profit? And sustainability used to be seen as a compliance thing. That is, you have to comply with the rules, increasingly, shall I say, tighter and tighter rules. But some time back, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, businesses realized it's not only about it's not about the stick, but also the carrot and the stick. It's not only about the challenge of meeting regulation, but also the opportunities of selling new products which are much more sustainable. So those are my just very few comments. I'll come in as needed. So can I request that we go in that sequence and each one of you take about 5 minutes to make your opening remarks around this topic. So can we just begin with Mr. Jagdish Barik, and welcome Mr. Barik. You're on mute. Are you on mute?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Ranade. So you have set the tone properly, and in the today's scenario, sustainability is both the single biggest challenge as well as single biggest opportunities, how we take it in the business. So the topic which we have decided, that how sustainable product can be profitable to industry, is very appropriate for the time being, and that's also my favorite one. And so why it is favorite is we have been driving this sustainability maybe last 8-9 years, but we are seeing the changes, how the transformation has happened from the regulator, then the certification, then slowly coming to the consumers and the financiers. So the sustainability is now a commitment by marketing and finance team as well. Initially, we are facing a lot of challenge. Though we find it the easy commitment from our manufacturing team, our production team at the shop floor, it's always a challenge how to get a commitment from marketing and finance team. So this has given really a boost. Sustainable product has given a boost to the for the acceptance of the sustainability and a commitment for sustainability by the marketing and finance team. I am seeing it very clear buy-in by the CMOs and CFOs of the business, including the CEOs in last 2 years, especially during the pandemic and just before that, and even the pandemic, the COVID is going on. So that's a huge commitment. I can see the business, but how it has happened, they are seeing a very clear benefit, and the sustainable products are actually driving the business. They are driving the profitability. So that has given a buy-in by our CMO and CFOs. So giving a little brief context on the sustainable product, the definition may change from business to business, but you have given a brief concept on that. So it's basically, there are three aspects. Is the environmental aspect, how we take care of carbon, water, then renewable energy, biodegradability, chemical management, and all these aspects, environmental aspect. Second is the social aspect. In social aspect, we take care of labor, human rights, and supply chain transparency and traceability, then ethical sourcing of the material. So these are the things we currently take care of to make a product sustainable. And economic benefits. Economic benefits is, the concept of circular economy, going beyond the recycling, how we are upcycling the product, and how we are doing the changes in the processes so that we can utilize the resources more efficiently. So that's also considered as a sustainable product. So these are primarily 3-4 aspects of sustainable product in the definition. So we have a definition of value-added product. So now the sustainable product is the definition which is coming part of that, and we are also tracking that on quarterly and annual basis, how the percentage level of sustainable product has grown quarter-on-quarter basis. So there are very clear increase in sustainable product across all our businesses. I can see that even 3-4 years back, where we are in around 20-25% level of sustainable product in our ABY, which is yarn business, which has gone to 45% last year, and this year we are targeting for 65%. So there are business models which are changing, and there are many business who are working at 100% sustainable product to make the business profitable. So that's a very clear, visible trend in that direction. Coming to some statistics, if you see the report of Pulse for the fashion industry, so they are telling that if we will run the business as usual, then our EBITDA is going to reduce by around 3%, and profit reduction will be around $52 billion. So that's the report coming up, and 66% of the consumers, they are ready to pay more if we can provide sustainable product. And especially for the millennials, they are telling that 72% of the millennials, they are telling they are ready to pay more if they will get a sustainable product in the market. And there is a very clear direction that there are 9 global companies who are in Fortune 500. Their revenue is more than $1 billion from sustainable product. And that volume is contributing to the 75% of the growth of the business. Maybe we can expand it further when we will discuss it. So these are all global big companies and focusing on sustainable product.
Okay.
So volatility is there, and here it has to stay. But we have to make our business resilient and flexible to be successful in the business. Early movers will succeed. If we will not move early, we will just wait and watch and see other competitors, how they are doing, then we are going to lose business. Collaboration is the key. Even sometimes you have to collaborate with competitors, collaborate with all supply chain partners to be successful in the business of sustainable product. So there is a glaring gap between the best and the rest. So it's differentiating the things. So thing is that we have to be sustainable, and sustainable products is key for the success of the business.
Okay.
And if you see the green packaging, so that's almost the volume of the green packaging is increased double in last 5 years. And there are 0.5 million solar cells are being installed per day in China, and 2 wind turbines per hour is being installed in China. So that's the rate of movement which is happening across the globe and in our business.
Okay.
With this, I will conclude.
Thanks, Mr. Jagdish. I just want to have one quick question, very quickly, but we'll move to Mr. Ashish. You said your sustainable product portfolio has gone up from 25 to 45%. So is there a very sharp definition of what is a sustainable product and what is not a sustainable product in ABY? Is it
Yes,
sharply defined? So what is the definition?
We have defined on basis of that environment, social and economic benefit. So these are the three criteria we have taken.
You have a threshold metric number. Above that it's called sustainable, and below it is called non-sustainable.
Not non-sustainable, but out of all our product portfolio, then we decide on basis of those definition of environmental, social, and economic impact. Then we classify those products as sustainable product.
Sure. Thanks. So we'll come back to you, Mr. Jagdish. So we'll move to Mr. Ashish. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned, Mr. Jagdish, that the sustainability concept includes economic sustainability also, by the way. We tend to forget that. Anyway, Mr. Ashish, your Mahindra experience. So briefly, maybe 5 minutes. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ranade. Delighted to be here. And yes, I will be sharing my perspective from the context of the auto industry, being the last mile mobility business. I think when you think of automakers, there are multiple levers that one can consider to accelerate the path to profitability where it comes to making EVs mass market. And frankly, the challenges come down to finding the right cost and revenue levers to narrow the gap to profitability that one faces in the early years. And I think there are frankly 5 or 6 key levers. The first one really, which most marketeers are familiar with, would be product and product design. So it's really about optimizing electric vehicle designs. Dedicated EV platforms, in fact, are the ideal way to go. And there are some studies that have determined that you would end up saving about 50,000 rupees if you have a dedicated EV platform where it comes to your fixed cost allocations, because there are just fewer components that you need to assemble. The second point really comes in terms of value neutral decontenting. There are a lot of features that one puts into a product which a customer doesn't necessarily appreciate or even desire. So that's why I would call it value neutral. And that's another key lever that could enable the path to profitability and shorten it. The third one I would say is really optimizing one's product for what I would call urban mobility, but that doesn't necessarily restrict us to urban and bias us towards rural. I'm just using the term urban to describe usage patterns. Today, the average usage per day by an Indian where it comes to a vehicle is only about 35 to 40 kilometers per day. Hence, if you look at it, that's about 1,000 kilometers a month, 12,000 kilometers a year. When you look outside India, you'll find vehicles, EVs, being made for ranges that go to 500 kilometers, 800 kilometers, and so on. Frankly, where it comes to the Indian context and adoption in India, if one is looking at making products mass market, do you really need to produce vehicles with a huge range rather than restricting it to, let's say, something that would really resolve or address range anxiety? So just by bringing the kilowatt per hour energy that a vehicle would really need for mass market EV adoption, you can end up saving another 1 to 1.5 lakh rupees by just optimizing the battery capacity that you want to put into an EV. The earlier speaker already talked about partnerships and collaborations. I think it comes down to how you reduce the burden of fixed costs. Can you share platforms? Can you share production capacities, plants? Can you look at the advantages of higher volume procurement of fuel cells, power electronics? So collaboration can work in a huge way here in enabling that path to profitability. The other is new business models. And I think this is critical for a marketer today. If you want to really boost margins, can we, look at things like, and this has been done in certain parts of the world. We in Mahindra tested it out a few years ago with one of our earlier EVs. So battery leasing, for example, and the earlier speaker was talking about also energy storage, the second life. These are all enablers of boosting margins. So, you talked about regulations. Regulations are definitely going to intensify. We already see something or the other coming up every month. We are now talking about multi-fuel engines. So ESG factors are shaping, at least globally, how investors are going to allocate capital. And that's one thing that one has to be really conscious of as well. In my view, if one educates a buyer, a consumer, in terms of the value that an electric vehicle or a sustainable product delivers today, they would certainly be willing to pay a premium because they see the long-term value of that product. So these would be the few words or the gist of, I think, the key levers that I think would enable a path to profitability for an automaker of EVs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ashish. Very sharp and crisp. Just one quick question. So you are basically saying last point was about educating the customer, that means making him aware of the value. But essentially your path to profitability seems to be on extracting a premium for the sustainable product. Is that correct? Is that a fair assessment of what you said? Extract a premium price.
So extracting a premium price is actually determined by the cost that one is purchasing fuel cells at today. The global average weighted price per kilowatt hour today is about $132 per kilowatt hour.
But that's dropping, no? That's going to be dropping.
If you take the last few months, it's actually going in the opposite direction.
No, that's because of disruption.
So raw materials have seen shortages, and I hope that doesn't continue. However, by 2025-26, there is expected to be price parity, and that break-even point, that threshold should be reached. I think, let me take the example of one of our products. So we have a three-wheeler auto. The three-wheeler auto comes in post-FAME at about an 85,000 premium to a regular auto. That's about 35% more. However, when you look at the total cost of operation and the savings generated, a customer can afford to buy another vehicle in 3.5 years. So if I can bring in the finance and his EMIs down to the same level practically of what he's paying today for a non-EV, there's no reason why he won't go in for it. So it's actually educating him and bringing in the right enablers for adoption.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Ashish. So we'll move to Ms. Betsy Vincent. I think you are also in mobility. So just like Ashish was talking about mobility, I think you're over to you.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ranade. I'm really happy to be here on this panel, and hello to everyone. I also want to thank Thomas Varghese for giving me this opportunity to participate and inviting me to be a part of this. So Green Cell Mobility is actually a very, very new company. We kind of began, we were set up only in 2020. We have been incubated. We're a startup, which is being incubated to be a leading pan-India shared electric mobility player. We're riding on the government of India's push for electrification of transportation in India. We as a company is backed, Green Cell Mobility is backed by Eversource Capital. And they are the fund manager of the Green Growth Equity Fund. Eversource Capital is by itself a 50-50 joint venture between Lightsource BP, which manages a large number of solar projects, as well as Everstone Group, which is a premier investment group in real estate, infrastructure, and they have assets in excess of about $6 billion. The Green Growth Equity Fund is also established with anchor investments from the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, backed by the Government of India, and also the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. So this is the FCDO Government of UK. So this is really our kind of genesis, reason for our genesis. in terms of operations, where are we today? So we operate in the space of mass mobility. So it is electric buses, and that really is our area of focus at this point of time. Going forward, because we want to be a platform that provides electric mobility as a service, we're going to look at the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler space as well, but that would be possibly a year from now. In the mass transportation space, we under the various, we work with and operate with the authorities. For example, in the state of Uttar Pradesh, we operate about 750 buses, out of which across about 14 cities of UP, out of which already we've achieved a start of operation, a commercial start of operation there. And we've almost rolled out about 300 buses there and continue to do so even as we speak. Again, we have presence across, Gujarat, West Bengal, and other parts of the country as well. So we have in our portfolio about 1,100 electric vehicles. And in the business to consumer space, we are launching in a month or two our operations, where we actually procure and operate buses, starting in the south and going towards north. And we have a plan of about 3,000 buses over the next 2 years. So that's really who we are and where we are going. As a part of sustainability, our focus areas therefore remain safety in a very big way, because in this space, safety is very critical for any passenger, whether he's in our vehicle or you're talking about the community through which we operate in. We're talking about achieving eco-efficiencies in operations, being climate friendly, and that is one area that was constantly on our agenda, and focusing on well-being of communities, whether it is in terms of gender inclusivity, or driver family development and things like that. So that's really our start. Of course, the electric mobility sector, most people would consider it to be a very, very sunrise space, given the subsidies under FAME 2, where the outlay is over close to 10,000 crores. And, of course, for our operations, we are, of course, funded, and therefore we in turn invest and participate with other operators to manage these buses. And, we see that there is, we have alternate channels that we go to for funding, in addition to the traditional commercial banks, the way we see it is that, of course, source of funding, is always, we have a certain level of play in that sense, because we can go to multilateral funds with our kind of business. And it does attract, because the EV space requires us, and given that we have this kind of backing by the Green Growth Equity Fund, we almost have to comply, and from the beginning, with a large number of required environmental and social compliances, and we want to proactively work in that space. So in that sense, if you ask me, are sustainable products profitable? Well, if we had to compare ourselves with a bus which has the internal combustion engine, I believe that yes, from the capex perspective today, we would both be almost at parity. If you consider a bus in the likes of Volvo, but the moment we get into an operating environment, the benefits of being electric kicks in. Because you take a typical diesel bus, and he's operating at almost 100 rupees a kilometer. And today, if you look at the bidded price for electric buses, about 55 rupees a kilometer. So right there there itself, you see an advantage. And of course, this advantage, why do we need therefore a subsidy? Because these advantages play out when you're looking at large intercity operations. But in an intracity operation, you are mandated to run a certain number of kilometers at a certain price, and therefore you need the subsidy on certain routes, and therefore you need the subsidy to basically help you to overcome that bit of that loss, you can say, in sense of economies of scale of going to a larger long distance run. So therefore overall, the total cost of ownership definitely works out to be lower. And how does it then work out for us, for our customers? And I mean, we are in the process of launch of our commercial operations. So, we're going through that whole cycle of market research and understanding consumers' needs, wants, aspirations. And the learning from that is that consumers by themselves who travel on buses are cost conscious. They're price sensitive.
Right.
And premiums to them is rather unfair. But the fact that it is electric, it gives it definitely, like I said, there is already an advantage. And you can offer so much more to a customer in terms of comfort, in terms of possibly giving him better seating instead of the regular, spring seats. You give them air suspension seats. You give them a better look and feel to the vehicle. You get them, better indoor air quality because all these buses are air conditioned.
Yeah.
You give them noiseless travel, and so that's the benefit. And what does a customer really want? He really wants to be safe. He wants to go from point A to point B with no incident, and therefore driver behavior, driver training is very, very critical. He wants to make sure that it is hygienic, especially in today's day and time. And though you said, yes, pandemic does not play a role, but I think the sense of hygiene and sanitation has now really kind of upped. The pandemic has upped that the ante on this. And of course, he definitely wants punctuality. So I believe, therefore, yes, demanding a premium in this kind of an industry really may seem unfair to the customer.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Ms. Betsy. Actually, in fact, when they talk about pollution, they say air pollution, water pollution, and noise pollution too. So
yes,
let's not forget that the buses also are almost noiseless. In fact,
noiseless.
We are seeing them. I live in Mumbai, and we are seeing quite a lot of them in Mumbai city.
Yes.
And it's amazing. It just whispers behind you. You don't even know a bus.
You don't even know it's there. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I guess your customer is not the customer, the commuter who's paying a fare which is mandated by government rates. Your customer is really the government because they're buying the fleets of buses.
Absolutely.
So in that sense,
when I talked about the customer, go ahead.
I meant when you're talking about sustainability and profitability for this panel, we have to look into in that context that the governments are finding it. I mean, the economics is working out because governments want to push this. And they don't mind paying slightly higher. And then the scale, once you have the scale, then your OPEX is going to be, as you said, lower, 100 rupees per kilometer against 55. That comes with scale.
So when I refer to the the customers' wants and price consciousness, it was about our commercial operations, which will not attract, and we do not go for government subsidy.
But intra-city, I think,
that is intercity. So the commercial operations are intercity, which is funded entirely from our end, but intracity is of course with authority, and we have to abide by authority requirements.
Thanks, Ms. Betsy. So we'll come back to you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to Mr. Anirudh Jalan. I think you are a startup guy, so one only startup in this panel, and so please tell us about the startup and connection between sustainability and profitability.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Ranade, for the opportunity. So I think recycle. What we're trying to do is really trying to create a B2B marketplace for waste, and I think when I saw the question that can products that are quote unquote sustainable be profitable, I think I think I'd like to sort of spend the next 4 to 5 minutes talking a little bit about the learnings that we've had from the supply chain of waste, and how, as you alluded to, some of the factors of scale and operational costs coming down eventually, how that might apply going forward. So overall, as a business, over the past 3 years, what we've been doing is we've been working with the kabadiwalas, the aggregators, bulk waste generators, and connecting them on a digital platform with recyclers, with co-processors pan India. A lot of this space, sort of came into existence with the Swachh Bharat mission, and then was further catalyzed with the EPR, the Extended Producer Responsibility Law, that came in for plastics and electronic waste in 2016. So I think, in terms of the pricing, the economics, every year when we ask ourselves, what are the metrics this year for the price of waste, for the price of fabrics, that's coming in, eventually, turning into something else, uh, the story changes uh, very rapidly. And therefore, at the end of every year, if you're going to revisit this question, can products that are sustainable be profitable? I think the optimism is going to change dramatically, and at some point, probably, my forecast is 2023 or 2024, we'll see an exponential optimism, increase in optimism towards the profitability. So, in is kind of starting off with the the economies of scale. We work with about 3,000 sellers on our platform. Uh, Many of these sellers, are basically the kabadiwalas, small waste aggregation center, on the Assi Ghat in Varanasi, a large center maybe in Calcutta, or a mid-sized center in Hyderabad. These are hyper-local centers getting waste from households, from bulk waste generators, and the economies of scale work very, very well in these facilities. The moment you bring in the awareness, the moment you bring in fair pricing, there is a dramatic reduction, in the pricing, and the room for optimization allows for it to go to recyclers very, very quickly. And not only is the economies of scale existing, but also with network effects. So what we have done is we have used digital platforms, and we are a technology first company, and basically use digital platforms to bring in what we like to think might be network effects going forward. So today, if you've got, let's say, 50,000 rack pickers participating on the platform, providing waste sustainably, let's say, to kabadiwalas or to collection centers, can that create a network effect going over to 1 million or 2 million rack pickers or waste pickers going forward? And that dramatically, again, lowers the cost of procurement, and reduces the transaction costs across the value chain. So net, as a marketplace for waste, as the EPR law matures, as more and more brands, become more and more conscious and serious about its implementation and fulfillment, there's a larger amount of value that's now passing on to the informal sector, to the downstream collection side, which is bringing in the benefits of the economies of scale. In 2016, when the extended producer law came in, only a handful, maybe two or three brands started off. In today, every large corporate, whether it's Unilever, whether it's Coke, whether it's Pepsi, whether it's Pidilite, Marico, all of them are very serious when they look at sustainability, and no one looks at EPR as a compliance. We look at EPR as an effort to fulfill our sustainability goals. And I think that's where, going forward, our marketplace enables that agenda, to enable the traceability of value going downstream. As I discussed, this supply chain for waste is pretty fragmented. You've got about 7 or 8 stakeholders between the collection and final recycling. But the moment that value comes in and sort of greases the stakeholders across various touch points, there's a lot of network effects and supply side disruptions that happen at various intervals, thereby together bringing an exponential or a multifold reduction in cost and the economies of scale coming in. So in summary, today we are selling PET bottles, other kinds of plastic waste between sellers and buyers. but there is an onward marketplace which takes that recycled products onward to Adidas, to Puma, to Nike, and to Reliance, and the value of the traceability, and the more ubiquity of that traceability lowers the cost of procurement, and allows that particular sustainable thread to become profitable going forward.
Great. So are you a platform player?
Yes, we're a platform player, yes.
So, and your business does not in any way endanger the kabadiwalas?
No.
Okay, because in your absence, the kabadiwalas were doing something similar. They were sourcing and delivering it to some recycler, but surely a platform player always is a disruptive. I mean in a good way. But so who are you disrupting?
Right. So as I mentioned, so typically there were 7 stakeholders, right? You had the rack picker, the kabadiwala, the aggregator, and typically the aggregator was never selling to the recycler directly. You had another 2 or 3 agents, traders, money lenders who basically did not facilitate collection, but actually provided the working capital to enable this. So we disintermediate at the point of the kabadiwala.
Okay.
So to that extent, and then.
I mean, yeah, so I understood. But in fact, there's no reason why you can't expand into, for example, India is one of the few countries we discovered, at least when I was younger, that they actually, in the West, they used to ask, oh, you mean somebody comes and gives you money to take away your old newspapers? But
Right.
To this day, it continues. And then that's also waiting for a big business disruption. But we'll come back to you, Mr. Anju. So I'm going to go to Ms. Sulka Kelkar, World Resources Institute. So I guess she'll bring a different perspective from a think tank, I guess. Over to you.
That's right. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And yes, I work at a higher level, a more academic level. All of you are dealing with these things day by day on the ground. So obviously your experiences, your insights are extremely valuable. What I can offer from my side is a slightly global perspective in terms of 5 imperatives that are really, the driving forces behind the kinds of things that you're trying to do, which will propel this along even further. And these 5 imperatives are domestic policy, global policy, technology and materials, financing, and long-term investment, right? So I'll tell you a little bit about what I mean by these. So on the first, which is the domestic policy, most of you would have heard about these very sort of ambitious new targets that the Prime Minister of India announced at the Glasgow Climate Summit in November last year. This includes increasing our renewable energy from what is currently 150 gigawatts to 500 gigawatts in less than 9 years. It means making renewable energy share of electricity going from 25% to 50%. Now, megawatt by megawatt, RE is cost effective compared to coal. But our modeling for the economy as a whole shows that this kind of scaling up to 500 gigawatts is not going to happen on simply cost or economic grounds alone. It will need more supportive policies. It will need more investment in battery storage to convert that capacity into actual generation. So this is going to be quite difficult, but it's going to be very important because it goes beyond energy. If you have cleaner electricity, that means your electric vehicles are running on renewable energy, on clean electricity. Industry is substituting the use of fossil fuels by hydrogen that is prepared from or produced from renewable energy. So that's green hydrogen. Same with the building sector, for example. You could have more electrification of a lot of building components like cooking or lighting. So this is something that will play out throughout the economy. It does pay for itself in the long run, all of these actions, because there's fuel saving, operations and maintenance, but the costs are upfront, the capital costs are upfront. So there's going to be a big push in this decade to bring in these capital flows into the scale of the energy transition that's required in the country. Of course, it's going to create jobs, but our estimate is that over the next 3 decades, the kind of transition that's required in our economy is going to cost $2 trillion. So that just gives you a hint of the scale of the challenge for our country. But the eyes of the world are very much on India in many different respects. And one of these was on, say, the phase down of coal, which got a lot of attention at the end of the Glasgow Climate Summit. It's very important to note that another way in which the eyes of the world are on countries like India is that at this Glasgow summit, all countries, including India, committed to reporting their emissions every 2 years, not just in what was the format so far, that is a biennial update report, just information, to what is now going to be called a biennial transparency report. That means it's not just for information, it's going to have to follow some standardized formats, and it's going to be subject to scrutiny by international experts. So all the emissions that we report as a country are going to come under the spotlight. Another very important global development that you would all be aware of is the European Union's carbon border adjustment mechanism. Because their own industry is subject to higher standards when it comes to emissions, they want their imports also to be subject to the same standards. And it's not just the EU, even the US has been toying with the idea of a polluter import fee in these energy intensive, GHG intensive sectors. And it also has its domestic low carbon standards for steel and cement. So this is something that our industry will have to be prepared for if we want to expand into these global markets. So when you said, Dr. Ranade, that your customers are younger and global, well, they are also living in jurisdictions which have stricter policies. There's very interesting stuff happening in Southeast Asia in terms of an energy transition mechanism, where a bunch of multilateral donors and philanthropies are actually paying to buy coal power plants only to shut them down. This is happening in Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines. And so it may be worth looking at some of our own inefficient power plants as well, and see if we can come up with some kind of transition deal that actually eases this transition for us, for our workers in particular. But we'll have to go beyond energy and look at materials and technology. We'll have to secure the minerals that are going to power this low carbon transition. And we'll have to decarbonize industry through material efficiency and the circular economy that some of you spoke about. And you'll have to take along your MSME partners as well. Finally, I'll just end with a couple of lines on financing and investment. On financing, there is a whole move towards greening the financing system. Very few people know that the Paris Agreement on climate change has 3 overarching goals. One is about reducing emissions. 2 is about adapting to the impacts. But the 3rd is about greening the entire financing system of the world so that it is aligned with the first 2 goals. So RBI has signed on to this, SIDBI is getting involved in this, and this is really something that we'll have to be ahead of. On long-term investment in particular, pension funds and others are looking very hard at industry now, not just in terms of what are your current emissions, but whether the plans to reduce these emissions are aligned with science. Are these science-based targets? So more than simply lip service, but a rigorous methodology to reduce emissions over time, not just by resorting at the last minute to tree planting, but actually planning to reduce your emissions and to report and monitor them over time. So this is just my summary in terms of the various imperatives that will be playing out and become more and more important over the coming decades.
Thank you, Ms. Ulka. Thank you. So I'm very impressed by the example you gave of the initiative to buy out old plants to shut them. Because one of the reasons, especially this switch over to greener sources of energy is held back is because the legacy project, the legacy technology is still on an incremental basis making sense. And unless you actually shut them down, and that's a huge cost. And so
absolutely,
so there's a multilateral.
And there are a couple of additional issues in our country. One is restoring the land that has been, in some sense damaged by the coal power or coal mining operations. There needs to be financing for that. And the second is that even if this transition plays out over a decade, and we have mostly coal miners or coal power workers who retire by then, there will still be some who will need to be supported. Some kind of safety nets will have to be provided to the workers. So for both of these, there is a requirement for what is being called more and more now a just transition. South Africa got a major just transition deal of billions of dollars from the World Bank last year, but their just transition deal was in some sense set up by a presidential commission, which had been working for the last almost 9 to 10 years. I think for India also, we will need something of an effort of that scale.
Okay, great. So, I'm hearing from the panel, a lot of the push has come from regulation, that whether it's the Glasgow promises or whether it is, the regulatory agencies. I want the panel to think about the consumer pull, that there is the strong consumer pull which has created a product, sustainable product, and therefore profitable. So does anybody want to jump in on this give an example on very clear cut, that I know it may not be easy, but would you like to give an example where it's clearly a product which has arisen primarily because of a consumer pull? Consumers are demanding it, and there's just no choice for us but to deliver this sustainable product.
Yeah, just
Mr. Jagdish, yeah.
I just want to give example in our business. So see, I'll not say that the price is, we are demanding a premium. In most of the customers, they are asking for sustainable products. So there is a lot of pressure on them. And
so your customers are the large Zaras of the world, or are they end customers?
No, I'm talking about the fiber and yarn business.
Okay.
So they are actually the downstream of the supply chain. So maybe that premium aspect and other things they're getting at the upstream, who are directly dealing with consumers and all. But in the downstream of the supply chain, we are getting a lot of demand, a lot of requirement from the customers, brands and retails.
Correct.
For yarn and fiber, which are sustainable. And that is how it has given a drive to the business to go from that I was mentioning earlier, is in our ABY 25 to 45, and we're targeting for 65% of the sustainable product. Similar kind of push we are getting in acrylic fiber. Recently, we have developed a product which is 50% waste and 50% virgin material.
Okay.
The resale material. So in fact, the cost-wise, if you say, it is less, but the process cost is increasing because we have to run that material at a little slow speed.
Yeah.
But the quality is even much better than the 100% virgin material. So it's very surprising. And, but there is a lot of demand coming from the market. So that's how we are developing those kind of products, which is in the market. And in our domestic textile business, there are a lot of waste which was getting generated in linen business. So we have developed specific brands like Caballo and Majuri. So those brands, they are completely developed from the waste. So recycling those waste, and so that is being established in the market and generating the growing the top line and bottom line as well.
Mr. Ashish, you have raised your hand. So example.
Sure, I just wanted to give another example from the auto category, from last mile mobility. This is a segment that actually was born about a decade ago in North and East India, and it's called the e-rickshaw segment. Okay, that segment has really taken off in the last 3 or 4 years, not counting last year. We entered this segment about 3.5, 4 years ago. This is a segment that sells about 16,000 vehicles every month if one takes the recent quarter.
Wow.
So if you're looking at natural pull, which has been recognized over a long period of time, but really gone big, it's in the last 4 years, and that's e-rickshaws. And that experience has now moved across to electric autos. So the first people to recognize this are the ones who are spending money on fuel, fossil fuel, and they're seeing the differences. You're also seeing the differences in the commercial segment, which is the cargo carrying segment. They're early adopters. So that's where the total cost of operation makes a significant difference.
But there were some pain points about batteries, right? That the battery replacement cost was high. So you've been able to address that for the e-rickshaws or the battery aspect.
Well, in my view, right now the market is still primarily a lead acid market. We've got products in both the lead acid segment and in the lithium ion segment. Lithium ion batteries, of course, have a much longer life, and they're yet to see a single replacement cycle. So
Correct.
we find that already in North and East India, in fact, a market like Delhi, 40% of that market has already started switching to lithium ion. So we are seeing strong pull in that segment, both in e-rickshaws and autos.
And do
For
you offer a
lithium ion.
buyback, because the life of the battery is twice as much as the vehicle? So the vehicle runs out much before the battery. So does the automaker offer a value by saying we'll buy it back from you or something, the battery?
At the moment, we haven't seen the market demand that. Yes, financiers would love to see that. However, we've got products that are out there for the last 4 years that have covered 2.5 lakh kilometers. We're yet to replace a single battery.
Yeah.
So in my view, it's easier to replace a fuel cell for as low as 7,000-8,000 rupees versus wanting to replace a battery at 100, 130, 150,000.
Ms. Ulka, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was thinking of 3 examples. I mean, fast fashion is one, millets-based baby food is another, and the third is bicycles. But for all of these, consumer demand is not sufficient. We need supportive policies. For example, you need bike lane infrastructure, or you need farmers to have that market access. Otherwise, consumer demand itself will not lead.
So where did the consumer demand come from? Is it chicken and eggs? So I'm sorry to mix up the food.
No. No, I think it's also a little bit of a generational shift. For example, for fast fashion, it's the TV show, that actually created, there was one particular late night show which created a lot of, how would you say, shock about the wastefulness of fast fashion.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are many pop culture, impacts, especially with the younger crowd.
Okay. Mr. Anurag, I have a question about waste, which may not be related to your business. You see now, let's assume a lot of the younger cohort, globally aware, more enlightened approach of consumers, they're going in for greener products. At the same time, we have platform economics like your company, meaning they're taking over the delivery, the connection between consumers and producers. What I mean is that e-commerce companies are basically, taking over. But in the process, the whole packaging scene is changing because, you buy I'm very happy to receive a green product at home, right inside my living room, but I have to open this 17 layers of packaging, and I'm not sure if the packaging is actually not harmful. So willy-nilly, I'm a responsible consumer going for green products, but the way it's being delivered to me is actually increasing the waste, that to unsustainable waste. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think delinking packaging, the kind of packaging that you use, even stuff like multi-layered packaging, glossy packaging, it's very difficult to kind of delink all of those, completely from a product or from, the ethos of that product directly. For us, it's not so much about what the packaging is. It's more about how do we channelize that packaging back for reuse and back into the circular economy. I think we don't. I think we find it extremely hard to kind of answer that question because that ties in a lot with your overall marketing, branding goals, and then what becomes competitive and not, and therefore today if you are marketing a product which is very sustainable or with only paper packaging or something that's very eco-friendly, becomes prohibitively expensive to even drill that down to a larger community. And therefore for us, the more important question is that irrespective of what the packaging is, can we collect it and can we channelize it to the right demand side, whether it's a recycler, whether it's a cement factory, whether it's a waste to energy plant, or any of those.
Okay. And we touched briefly on the financing aspect. I think the fact that so the route to profitability, let me just summarize because we're running out of time. One is, of course, consumer pull, and wonderful examples you gave from the yarn that Mr. Jagdish gave, or the 3 examples that Ms. Ulka gave. So there's one route to profitability. There's a demand out there, and you need to meet the demand. People are willing to pay the price. Second is regulatory requirements, and we've seen that is a very common theme. That regulatory requirements means your customers or a customer's customers have to comply. And third is financing. I heard somebody say that it's the cheaper source of financing is making your product profitable. So you're getting subsidized either investable fund. I heard Ms. Betsy, you say that you got investments from NIIF, National Infrastructure, what is it, Investment Fund.
Yeah.
So that's in a way, or if you get an investment from IFC, in a way that's access to subsidized fund, right? Your company has got access to subsidized funds. So that will contribute to profitability too. Are you going to forever depend on such green bonds?
Absolutely not. And that is what we are now kind of, when I talked about our commercial operations, which we're launching in a month or so, those are completely bereft of any fiscal, benefits coming in from, of course, government. But of course, there's still the
but the market for green bond is expanding.
Pardon me?
Market for green bond is expanding all the time.
Yes, the markets, and it's a great potential. There's a potential for the green bond because as an effective instrument, especially because especially when we're looking at renewable energy, electric mobility sectors, there is a great amount of scope to receive such funds. And of course, though it's not so attractive, but even when you're taking in these huge amounts of funds, even 0.5% to 1% does make a big difference.
Huge, of course.
In your overall balance sheet. And I think, from that perspective, when you spoke about is it a customer pull? I think many times in the case, especially for mass transport, and when we look at buses going intercity, not many of us do have very happy memories, especially of traveling by bus. People have a lot of memories by rail,
but I can tell you in Mumbai, once you get into the electric bus, you're not going to go back to your diesel bus. I mean,
absolutely.
It's just a completely different experience.
So, it will ultimately, the receipt of these funds, the growth of such companies, the growth of the sector itself will, kind of evolve. You will have stronger, charging infrastructure. And I think the market will really open up. Because right now, what is the access of vehicles? Even if a four-wheeler in the market is 20 per 1,000 people, so we have great potential to actually, go the electric way, as the price drops. And today, the lithium-ion batteries, you're talking about, 400 kilowatt-hour batteries, which can take you for 500 kilometers.
Yes, of
course. It's out there. For people to get onto it and bring that benefit to huge number of customers who cannot afford rail or air travel, and still give them a great service, which otherwise they would never have experienced because of the cost of fuel. And here is the advantage.
I think I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to wrap up the session. One little tidbit story from Mr. Jalan. About 10 to 12 years ago, we were trying to source the Kabadiwala the waste to actually burn it as in the kiln, our cement factory. Because, a cement business is wonderful. It'll just take anything. You throw anything, any waste can go not only for the waste heat production, but also actual raw material into the kiln. So we were trying this pilot project. And we thought we'll work with the Kabadiwala. But then eventually what happened is that by the time it came to the main collection point, we only had stone, glass, and metal. There was hardly anything of calorific value. All the plastic and paper and rubber had vanished. But that was 10, 12 years ago. And today I'm very happy to see that actually your model is working much better. So that itself is an example, I think, how that sustainable product has become profitable, with perhaps more awareness. And I heard Mr. Ashish also say something about educating, right? Did you not say educating the customer? So thank you all very much. I think this is a very, very rich topic. And as you can see, we are heading in that general direction with the tailwind of favorable winds from 3-4 directions: the consumer pull, the younger cohort. Ms. Ulka gave the example of fast fashion. So it's actually, you got to service that market, otherwise you'll miss the bus. Bus, of course, refers to Ms. Betsy's business. And there's regulatory pressure And of course, there's cheaper financing, there's investors and shareholders who are pushing in the direction. So I think don't be surprised that suddenly there'll be like an inflection, a big tidal movement towards this. So thank you all for your time very much. Very, very interesting and illuminating discussion. And I wish you all a good day and a great sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you.
A big thank you to all our speakers and Dr. Ranade for taking us through this discussion. Of course, this is very enlightening for what the future may hold, how sustainability can pan out for companies and consumers in the years ahead. Thank you all for joining us and sharing with us your views and insights.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.